Well, welcome everyone to Webinar Wednesday. I'm sure we're going to have a couple more people jump on here. Um, just to let you know, we remind you guys have all been muted because it is being recorded. If you do have questions, please put them in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask them as well, which either way you prefer. So with that, today we have Robin, who is the president and founder of Strategic HR, where she brings nearly 30 years of human resource experience in healthcare, manufacturing, service, and nonprofit organizations, creating solutions to help them recruit, retain, and develop the best and brightest employees. Robin provides a wide range of outsourced HR support in the areas of strategy, recruitment, training and development, benefits and compensation, communications, employee relations, record keeping, and legal compliance, and health, safety, and security. As a business owner and experienced human resources professional herself, Robin has a deep understanding and empathy for the challenges that business owners and HR professionals face. She is able to leverage her unique experience to connect with and customize the best solutions for clients. So today, Robin is going to speak on Can't We All Just Get Along? So I'm going to hand it over to you, Robin.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it. And good morning, everyone. I appreciate everybody joining the program this morning. My background, just on top of that, from regards to the generations, is I co-authored a book called Bridging the Generations Gap, and it was all about managing the different generations in the workplace. Honestly, this isn't new because we wrote that book in 2007, if you can imagine that. And we're a little bit ahead of everybody, panic about the differences in the generation. It's interesting as we kind of tie in the generations with this whole issue we've been faced with, which is wrapping your head around being remote, being in the office, being hybrid, and how does that impact the different generations in the workplace. So last November, December, we decided, well, let's put it out there. Let's see if we can go out and get some updated data on the generations, as well as learn a little bit more about how this changes that we're experiencing with COVID is impacting all of us. So we've been doing that survey and actually leaving it open on an ongoing basis because we're seeing interest and needs shift. So it's been really good to just try to continue to stay with that pulse as it's constantly changing, which I'm sure each of you are finding too. I do want to get started just to kind of make sure we're all on the same page with the generations, and I want to try to make this as interactive as we can. So I'll give us kind of a level set of the generations, and then kind of want to pick your brains a little bit. So there are basically, I'll say now, 6 generations in the workforce. The dates, the labels, the age, all of this is really dependent upon a number of sociologists out there. Linda Gravin and I were the ones that did the research on Bridging the Generations Gap. And the results we shared here were basically how we were seeing things fall together, but then we went out and did look at what sociologists were saying and tried to really align what we were seeing with what other sociologists have done. So if you sat in on a generations program before, you might say, well, the dates are a little different. Every single one is slightly different, especially as you get into those younger generations. The biggest things we see all of them doing is they're looking at historical events that are taking place at the time of a generation is growing up, as well as technology. So you can imagine that technology's kind of gone warp speed in the last 5, 10, 15 years. So it really has dictated a lot of the changes. The other neat thing we see, especially with all the sociologists being just a little different, is if you or one of your employees happens to be right on the cusp of one generation, they probably can straddle both. There's enough things that have happened in their life that probably overlaps 2 generations, and they'll be a good bridge in your work environment because they do relate to both generations. I'll give you a real quick rundown of them just to help you get an idea of what I'm talking about. The radio babies are the oldest individuals in the workplace, and we surprisingly do still have them, but I think the latest statistic I saw was like 0.5%. I used to be able to say, how many of you on this training session have employees that are 70, 80, 90, and I'd get hands all the way up. And I think we're going to continue to probably see that, but maybe not as much as we might have seen in the last 4 or 5 years. The radio babies are that generation that, got their name because a radio is a staple in their home. They're also been called traditionalists or the silent generation. They're very much focused on the values of the community, views of political leaders, just that affinity to being in the workplace and being committed. Along behind them came the baby boomers. And again, I have the ages that we're looking at. They got their name because many celebrated their return from the wars by producing babies. Therefore, they got called the baby generation. You sometimes see them broken into black and white TV and color TV as well. When Linda and I were poking them to learn more, we said, what influenced your generation? And they said their immediate family, friends, and political events. And those of you that are baby boomers or have heard of them, there was a lot of political events going on, from the Vietnam War to the pill for women to civil rights, you name it, there's a lot of things taking place. So you saw a lot of individuals rallying behind each different scenario, each different event, and really did influence those baby boomers. Coming right behind them was the Gen X generation. We got our name from a Canadian novelist who was a Gen Xer and felt like that we were considered the wandering generation that really didn't know what we wanted to do when we grew up or what we wanted to be. And all of us will say that every generation is probably that way. But when we poke them on what influenced them growing up, it was world events as seen on TV. We have old movie videos of me toddle along while we're landing on the moon. So, you know, if you start seeing some of those things, the values of our friend and respected coworkers. So this is one of the smaller generations we've seen, less impact of large numbers versus obviously the baby boomers was huge. And then the millennials, you have the first wave millennials is that Gen Y, and second wave millennials is the Gen Z. It's broken up 500 different ways, but that's the way that makes the most sense to us. And what a huge generation they are. Gen Y obviously came after Gen X, and sadly enough, the reason they got their name is because it's the next letter in the alphabet. Although if you interview a lot of Gen Ys, they'll say, well, you know, we just want to know why, WHY we need to do things. And so their generation could have probably had a couple more letters in there. And talking to them, they said they really were influenced by community values, their grandparents, and likewise to the Gen Xers, world events as seen on TV. And we started seeing things really change on those things that are influencing them. For example, when we moved into the Gen Zs, that second wave of millennials, and I started seeing that stick. For a while, you did not see that stick. This generation started saying my values are influenced by a parent, not two parents, but a parent, generally because they were broken families of some sort. Music was another big influence, and I never listened to the words of songs until my kids were Gen Zs, and I was really scared at some of the songs that were playing that were influencing the kids. This generation also had a number of friends, but their friends were not necessarily, you know, 5 minutes from their house. They might have been on the other side of the world because of technology advancements with this generation. So they may never have physically met them, but they may have met them online. And then behind the Gen Zs, we have the generation next coming along. I say next because I've heard next, I've heard alpha, I've heard iDigital, I've heard generation digital, I've heard every name under the moon. I'm not hearing any of them stick yet, but I think we'll probably see that as they start dipping their toe into the workforce. And as we start hiring them, I think we're going to see that they're very different. So my focus is really trying to help everybody understand the generations when I speak. I by no means can say that every person's going to fit right into one of these 6 generations and they're all going to be exactly the same. So I'm the first to say anything that we talk about helps you to understand them, but definitely don't stereotype them with it because everybody is unique and has different influences growing up. And the real value of understanding the generations is understanding how those influences may have made them the way they are. I'm curious, there's about 7 of us on the call. I'd love to hear one, what generation do you feel you resonate with? What generation are you? And we'll start with that. So if you would either want to put in the chat what generation you are, or feel free to unmute and shout it out. Got some wine.
I'm a baby boomer.
Proud boomer, baby boomer. We love you guys.
Proud baby boomer, yeah.
Ah, somebody's got multiple people in the room, so they've got a good mix, X and 2 Gen Ys. And you know what? Two Gen Ys, not 2, are going to ever be exactly the same. So that's a good exposure for you. As you're typing in, also let me know what were you hoping to learn today? What was your reason for joining the call today? Add that into the chat for us too. All right, so nobody had any goals. Keep thinking about it. Let me know, because I want to make sure I structure what I share with you today around what you're hoping to gain out of it, especially with the smaller group. We can really make it individualized to you. One of the things I want to start off with is sharing a little bit about what we're seeing most recently in the generation. So I'm going to share with you the demographics that we had of the survey that we've started doing. We've got over 1,000 participants so far. That number is probably even higher since I last checked the number. So I want to give you just a quick snapshot of what we're seeing. Really, if you think of the 4 main generations, we're actually seeing a lot of data there. So radio babies, of course, dropping off, with that being such a low percent of the workplace. And then that next generation after the Gen Zs just being at that 19 years and younger are just really entering. So we're not seeing that quite as much. In our survey data, the baby boomers were 27% of our respondents. Gen X, 30%, Gen Z, 21, and Gen Y, 22. So pretty evenly distributed. Interestingly enough, when you look at the generations in the workplace, that tends to be very close to the numbers that you'll see. We also asked for gender, and I was very surprised to see of the 1,000+ people that responded to our survey, 70% were female and 50% were male. In talking with other groups, they said women are more apt to complete a survey than men. I've not ever heard that statistic, so it was interesting to me. But it was very interesting to see the mix there of those that responded. Demographically, our hope was to get as much participation across the country as we could. Obviously, our presence is here in Ohio, so you can see that number reflected there, as well as Kentucky being close by and friends and family in Florida. The good news is we had participation from just about every state other than Hawaii, North Dakota, and Vermont, and we're still determined we're going to get some folks from that area participating. But again, I would like to get it deeper. 1,000 gives us a little bit of data, but not quite as much as we'd like to get to be able to rely on the results, but at least they give us a picture. And that's what I want to share with you, is the picture we're starting to see with the generations to help you as you look in your workplace. And if it helps, I can send the slides over to the chamber after this is over, if that helps you from having to scribble a lot of these numbers down. So the first question we asked them, because all of us, especially today, are dying to say, is how did you find your job? Now think about when I ask this question, some people are not actively looking for a job. So this is where they found their job that they're currently in. And I'll give you a second to look at this, then I'm going to jump in and give you a little bit more details of diving into it. I did highlight networking because it's a resounding, all the generations saying that's where they found their job, is through networking. That networking may look different for one generation over another. It could be networking in some cases just with close family or friends. It could be getting more broad spread into churches, professional associations, groups they're attending. And again, that may switch a little bit based on the generation. So I'll dive a little deeper into that just to see some things that we saw in it. Of course, networking, I've never ever seen networking not be the #1 source in any of my years in HR, and that's been over 30. It's always all about who you know when you go looking for a job. There's just different ways to network now. It may not all be face-to-face over a coffee, especially given COVID. It might be face-to-face over a video chat. It might be over the phone, or it might be even a online where you're not even speaking to the person live. What we did notice is with each of the younger generations, we're starting to see the percentage that use networking drop a little bit. So if I go back, you can see the percentages start dropping as you get into some of the younger generations. So we are seeing them substitute some of that networking with other areas. For example, Gen X has an increase in using online job boards over baby boomers, which was an interesting shift. But Gen Y has an increase in using social media and other online internet searches over the Gen Z or Gen X's. We also saw the Gen Zs, again, most of them are college age, are using a little bit more of the college and community centers, which makes sense. And then also more internet usage over the Gen Y. So you keep seeing those changes shift year over year. So a lot of things are shifting to online. What I've told people is, how do you use this data? Is what does it mean to be seeing these shifts and changes, both in where people are coming from? So with networking still being at top, what does your employee referral program look like? Because again, that's your best networking source to find candidates in the job market, is your employees. Is there anything you need to do to improve it? I've seen quite a few people add referral bonuses lately, give business cards to employees to hand out to people they may run into for a referral program, but really dive deep into what you're doing. In addition, there's a huge uptick in social media. So that means companies may want to look at their brand presence out there on social medias and how active are you. So depending on the types of people you're recruiting, LinkedIn, have you claimed your company page? Have you fully taken advantage of all the fields there? Are you working toward getting followers? Strategic HR, for example, is we have like 54,000 followers now, really trying to penetrate the market. So when we post a job, it gets out to a lot of people. Obviously, those are probably going to be more your professional roles. So you can't give up Facebook if you've got a little bit more of the hourly roles. And the same thing, what does your Facebook page look like? How engaged are you into it? Are you sharing data to draw the right people in to follow you on those social media resources? So if you think about more people still networking and still going online, what can your business do to take advantage of that to help you attract more individuals to your workplace? Does anybody have resources that they're currently using that you'd want to share with regards to social media or internet that's just unique, or have questions on that? And I got my head down, so I didn't see some of you had shared. You're looking for understanding the communications across the office, and we'll make sure to hit that. Lots of retiring in my organization. So how do we transition younger workers and developing a team and really trying to help them connect? Interesting fact, we are seeing the baby boomers retiring more this time than the last recession in 2008, 9, and 10. Obviously, financially, in the recession in 2008, the stock markets, everything was down. So it was hurting financials for a lot of baby boomers that had planned to retire. We're definitely seeing with the market and everything higher, that increased tick of baby boomers starting to actually retire. And added on that, we're actually seeing the Gen Xers do the same thing. So we've got this workforce that's smushing down more and more every day. And it's really important for us to try to be doing things to take advantage of that intellectual capital that may be retiring from us. And how do we transition it down to those Gen Ys, Gen Zs, and even the new Alpha generation? So we asked the survey respondents, why did they join an organization? What really caused you to join an organization? Gen Ys and Gen Zs definitely resounded with the growth opportunity, because they're really trying to look at what is this organization going to do for me, and figure out where it's going to fit best into their career. But we did notice the Gen Zs plus less value on company values and how they align, and that's been higher in the past. But seeing that drop on placing the value is interesting. We think there may be a little bit of bitterness when you get, because you feel like you are disillusioned with the pandemic and maybe the things that have been on social media with everything we've been through in the last 3 or 4 years. But we're seeing them have a lower connection, and you'll kind of see that here in these lower spaces here. You're going to also see the Gen Ys and Gen Z selected flexible, tailored benefits more than the Xers and baby boomers, which surprised us too, because it's always been the baby boomers and Xers saying they wanted more selected and flexible benefits. So we're starting to say, what benefits do we offer in our workplaces, and how do they resemble or support the different generations you may have? So the first homework I always tell people is, if you don't know the breakdown of your workforce, that's where you need to start. So you know what you're working against. And then secondly, what would each generation need that might be different? If the baby boomers are looking closer at retirement, what retirement, long-term care, what programs like that are you offering to retain them? Maybe it's being able to job share or have part-time options. And then as you look at the Gen Ys and Gen Zs, what are some of the things you could be offering to them to help you really be catering to them? Some of them are saying they want more time off. Some are saying we've got these large educational loans. So looking at your workforce that you have internally, and what are some of those benefits that you currently offer today that maybe aren't getting utilized, and you could refresh them with things that might really accommodate the different generations in your workplace. A resounding answer we got from all the generations was typically we say one size doesn't fit all, but it was work-life benefits. And again, I really think things with COVID, a lot of things we've just experienced in the last few years has really influenced everyone to saying what they're looking for is that work-life balance. But it means different things to every individual, especially when you look across the generations. As I mentioned, the baby boomers, radio babies, and even some Gen Xers are retiring. So what kind of flexibility are they looking for that? Maybe they don't want to 100% retire, and is that an option? The younger generations may be looking for that flexibility to be at home while they're starting to raise their families. So I always suggest to people with this is maybe start looking at what's the flexibility in your workplace and what can it be? There's some jobs that can't be flexible from being remote, but can your hours be flexible? Is there a way to stagger hours to accommodate the different needs that people have? A huge thing we're starting to see is an increase in PTO, which means as a business owner, we got to staff up to cover the increase in PTO. And what can you do to help people maybe travel through the life side of their office? And that could be perks that are related to like concierge services. You know, are there things that you can do to help make life easier with different concierge services? My car is getting detailed today. There was cicada remnants on my car from earlier this year, and I can't get them off. So great concierge service is bringing that car washing to the workplace. So think of the things that your employees would say would be most helpful to them. Not far behind the work-life balance was salary. A very big focus on salary. We saw a lot of organizations freeze salaries in the last year because of the uncertainty of COVID. And those of you that are hiring right now or having some turnover right now are probably seeing the resurgence of the salary. We pretty much saw some of those hourly jobs jump from $8, $9, $10, $11, $12 an hour, well past the proposed minimum wage of 15 to we're seeing average starting salaries in that 17 and 18 an hour range. Really creating a lot of challenges for employers, ultimately increasing costs because if your costs of labor go up. So we really need to stay on top of what are the changes going on in the market from a compensation side. One, to help us attract people, but two, we've got to constantly be re-recruiting our current employees. So you really would recommend that you revisit your compensation ranges, your compensation to your employees. Are there any bonuses that you can give to be a little more competitive with the marketplace while you evaluate it so you don't lose employees? So take a very serious look at both what you're doing from flexibility as well as compensation. We did ask the same question of why are employees staying? And again, the same number one reasons to stay came back with work-life balance. So organizations that were doing it were actually able to be more successful in retaining employees because of that work-life balance. If you kind of look across the board here, I've given you some other reasons. Baby boomers said the work is interesting and they're respected. Ever since Lynn and I did the research on the generation, respect was a number one answer we were always seeing from people is respect. Respect because I'm older and I have a lot of experience I've had that I need to be able to share so you don't repeat it. Respect that I'm younger because, you know, I haven't learned anything, but I may have knowledge that I've gained over the years that you don't have. The Gen Xers, we tend to have the reputation of what's in it for me. So still looking for those flexible, tailored benefits that are going to benefit us individually. And then I also see the Gen Ys and Zs. You'll see some issues with, again, pay. They're keeping an eye on it. They've got some debt from school still. I'm even seeing some Gen Xers just finally paying off school debt too. So they've gotten to the end of that. And the work environment is another number one way that I often see Gen Ys and Zs saying, you know, I have to enjoy the people I'm going to work with if I'm going to be there all day. It's not new. It's just now they're saying if I don't enjoy my workplace, I'm probably going to go somewhere that does. It's really important to think about this within your workplace. I don't know if you've done stay interviews, if you've done engagement surveys. This is really a good time to really be thinking of how do I re-recruit my current staff? You don't want to have to replace them in this job market, so make sure that you're really looking internally and what do the employees working with you say is why they stay, what they'd like to see you do different or better, and that's going to really help you. I can give you, 30 minutes of feedback from surveys, but the best results you're going to get is asking your employees some of those basic survey questions. Like I said, why do you work here? What would you like to see us do different or better? The why do you work there continues for you to be a marketing message internally, but also to what you're doing to recruit and what would you like to see different. everybody gets worried they're going to have these grandiose, huge ideas, and they're not usually. I've seen simple things as, can we keep the radio on the shop floor, or, can we continue with the snacks in the break room, things that are not very expensive and extensive. So definitely helps you out a little bit better. The next thing I wanted to share with you is with regards to remote across the generations. It was a little surprising, and I continue to hear different stories as I keep my antennas up for what people are saying with regards to remote. Baby boomers were very neutral on whether they felt like it was remote, hybrid, in the office. They were more flexible on it. Gen Xers seem to strongly agree, I'd rather just work remote than being at the office. Gen Y's, their answer was agrees, and Gen Z's was neutral. So I've really been paying attention to this, because going into COVID, everyone was like, these Gen Zs, they want to work remote. They think they should be able to do the whole job from home, which is not at all what we're seeing now. We're hearing this generation's now saying, well, wait a minute, if I'm remote, how am I going to continue to grow and develop my career? How am I going to be able to be in front of others in the workplace that are going to help me network and step up the career ladder? What's going to happen to me if I'm not there? It's easier to be creative with other people. So everybody's wants and needs are very different, but we are tending to see this theme of the younger generation saying, I need the collaboration, the creativity. Does that mean they want to be in the office 100%? Not necessarily. It's probably back to that hybrid mix. But the hybrid mix for us as employers is probably the hardest of all the solutions, because you got to be able to balance what everybody's doing. Are you going to do everyone on the same schedule? You're going to create an A and a B team. There's lots of choices for how you might be able to do it. It's very hard for us to wrap our head around our hands to really understand what employees are doing remotely and how we can truly keep them engaged. I had to share this picture because I ran across it somewhere. I'm like, this is what all of us managers are picturing when we say we let you work 100% remote. Some of you'll be like, well, what's wrong with that? The computer's there, they're getting fresh air, who really cares? And others of you will be like, why are they outside by the pool? They can't be as productive, but it's what's in our minds. So in talking with so many companies, you got to really figure out, does it matter where the employee is when they work? If you've got very clear expectations and really set the stage of what they're expected to do, what deliverables they're expected to meet, productivity levels they're expected to meet, and you're measuring that, at the end of the day, that may not matter where they are working, but it's hard to set those metrics in place to help you do those measurements. The other thing I've had a few CEOs talk about is how this person looks. So if they're going to be on a Zoom call with a client, are you okay that they're at a poolside, sunglasses, and a hat? I had someone say, well, nobody told me differently. So make sure if you continue remote and you're doing video chats and video calls, what are your expectations as a business? Do you expect people to not have the baseball hat on backwards? Do you expect them to be dressed and well groomed? Is it the same? It should probably be the same as your policies in the office as it would be remote, but make sure you communicate those expectations rather than assuming your employees are on the same page with you with regards to what remote should look like. I want to share a few responses that we got from the survey just to give you some idea. I asked them if your current company allows you to work on premises or do you choose to work remotely? So again, all generations were consistent between that 31 and 36% said they choose to work remote all the time if given the choice. As we've started to see everything open up and now maybe close back, we keep seeing these numbers shift. So I think probably for the next 6 months or more, we're going to see things just bouncing back and forth from hybrid to remote to in person, assuming we get COVID to a livable level, because it's never going away. As much as we all thought it's gone and now it's back, it's never going away. We just have to learn how to work with it. And I think when we get through maybe next spring, we'll start seeing things level off to a new normal of what that might look like. Again, some organizations it has to be in person, some organizations it can be a combination, and that's what we're probably going to have to manage as we move forward. One quick question, has your preference changed? So when we gave people the choice of remote working last year, the generations all pretty much did come in between 55 and 63% saying that they actually do prefer a remote or a hybrid environment, whereas before they thought remote was it. All groups were low in choosing to work fully on site, like 10 to 17%. But Gen Z was the highest of saying they prefer to work on site. So again, back to that Gen Z generation kind of increasing there. The all groups range between 26 and 35% for being fully remote, again, except Gen Zs. They were in that lowest of that range. So we're going to continue to look at the data. Like I said, I'm pretty sure it's going to change constantly, and we're all going to need to stay on top of it. But hopefully this kind of gives you a taste of what's going on out there that you're dealing with as an employer internally, and can help you think through some different policies and procedures. There are a lot of things we need to be thinking about that we thought were temporary, and we're going to need to now make them formal policies. Get into anything from your telecommuting policy. We were even talking with an attorney the other day, and they said, what are your safety protocols for someone working from home? Do you realize if they work from home and get injured, it could still be on you? So, for example, we came up with things like if they tripped over the dog running to get their phone, is that workers' comp or not? Do you allow dogs in your workplace? It could become a little gray. If they happen to drop a manual, their employee manual or a book on their foot, and they now have something wrong with their foot, is that a workers' compensation issue? And yes, if it was a work-related book, it is. So we started down the path of things that we tried to say weren't work-related. This attorney was suggesting businesses have a policy that reserves the right to inspect the workplace, whether that's in the building, in the office, or whether that's at home, to make sure that maybe you have a checklist that the office space an employee's working out of is ergonomically correct, is safe, has the right setup in the office. So things that I don't think we ever thought of because we thought it was temporary. So again, start thinking about, with this being your new norm, your new reality, what you might need to change as far as your workplace. The other big issue I heard, and I'm looking back at comments now because it is a lot about getting along with everyone in the workplace, is the challenges recruiting the millennials. So I want to give you a little bit of information on recruiting and retaining millennials, but some general, I think I saw communication and how to communicate appropriately across the generations, how to transition the workers. So I'll kind of try to cover a little bit of both, especially given the changes we have on the call. Millennials, who are we? One of the first things I've been told repeatedly is millennials do not like to be called millennials, because that has almost a negative name to it, because over the years we've always said, oh, those millennials. They prefer to be considered the younger generation or the younger professionals. Those types of names are less negative, less derogatory. So something to think about. You see a lot of YP events, things like that. That is definitely something to think about as a way to approach the millennials and how they're in your workplace. I'm giving you a little bit of facts here on the slide that you can skim through to get ideas of who they are, and that'll help you. Again, I'm talking both the first and second wave, the Gen Y and Gen Zs. I always point out to people, if you remember from my first slide, there's some Gen Ys that are in their 40s. So these aren't young. They're covered by age discrimination too, because they're over 40. So we still have this workplace that is aging a little bit. When we really poked the millennials to find out what they're looking for when they look at organizations, so if you're trying to recruit them, it was everything from work-life blending, which is not work-life balance. It's how do I make sure that I have time to do both at the same time? Like, work is going to have family issues involve it, but family issues are going to have work involve it after hours. So the blending, that might be a little bit more of what they're focusing on. And that's where you start seeing the quality of life or the paid time off a little bit more. They want to learn from others, so they are looking for a team environment, which is challenging if you're 100% remote or you don't have people mixed. So it's finding ways to create that team culture. And that could either be projects where you create a cross group of people on different projects so they get to meet others and involved in other roles. Or it could be even some of the different initiatives for helping the business to do better be across the team. I'm very much looking for growth and development. What I've really found with all the generations, but the Gen Ys and Zs started it, is what is my career path? What's the timeline for that career path? And when can I expect to receive or reach any of those levels? And they're not looking for a career path that's 10 years from now. It's, what's going to happen in the next 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, those types of things. Technology is still going to be number one. If your workplace doesn't have the most up-to-date and recent technology, it's going to be frustrating for some of these younger generations in the workplace because they're going to be used to using it at home. Culture needs to be aligned to them. The values need to be aligned to them. As much as we're starting to see that diminish through COVID, I still see these generations really looking for that connection. They like to volunteer. They like to give back to the community. So they're looking for that same in the businesses that they're going to work for. They're very, very environmentally conscious. A lot of us older folks mess that up for them. So they're really focused on what do we need to do? And does this company I'm going to work with have that same focus on the environment? We're also seeing these two generations being more, diversity is just a way of life. It's not something we need to really sit down and talk about because they do really focus on equality, inclusivity, and being more liberal and open. And you'll see that just be the way they are versus some of us that didn't grow up with that. It's not. We used to say the baby boomers were looking for perks, so this generation's looking for perks, but it may be autonomy, it may be rewards and recognition, it may be flexibility, it may just be the fun that you do at work. So they're looking for that extra cultural piece that you put in there with the perks. We've talked about flexible work arrangements, and again, you can't leave that behind. So this may give you ideas of how to attract them to your workplace. There were a mix of Gen Ys and Gen Zs that are in on the call today. I don't know if any of you want to share anything else that you would specifically recommend in the workplace that helps to attract Gen Ys and Gen Zs. I'll let you chat that in if you can think of anything in that regard. While we're doing that, I always tell people there's also places to find the younger generations. Your ads need to be short and get to the point of what the value of the job is going to be, a little more fun, and what are some of the mission and values of the organization to really feel like it's a connection for you. That good old referral system is very key in finding these people, friends, family, online network. They're very mobile friendly, so you've probably seen organizations start using texting in their recruiting. It's a very good way. If you can't get them to respond to your phone calls, text them. You're liable to get a better response. And then a big area that I often see businesses not looking at, and I'd encourage you to check it now or after this webinar, is your website. We already talked about social media, but do you have a careers page on your site? And how exciting and inviting is it to someone that comes to check you out? So most individuals, especially the younger generation, may see a post on Indeed, LinkedIn, what have you, and they're going to immediately go to your website and check you out. And on your website, what's the careers page? Do you have pictures of employees? Do you have a video of a day in the life of an employee? Do you talk about why you'd want to work there? What are the benefits? More detailed job descriptions. What's there that's going to get them engaged and want to apply to you, and then make it very easy for them to apply there. I had one individual that was a Gen Y say, actually he was a Gen Z, you want 14 pieces of information about me and we haven't even met. That 14 pieces you can get to on an application online really quick. You know, if you think of name, phone number, email, where you were, I mean, that 14 gets there pretty fast, and they're looking to get an engagement with you before they give away too much data, again, because of a lot of the identity theft and other issues we're seeing in the workplace. Other wares, I mentioned social media is a top place, but there is just tremendous amount of resources out there that you can get at your fingertips, and making sure you're keeping in touch with them and shifting them. I might see one resource work today and tomorrow it doesn't work. But making sure for the younger generations, you're out there trying all the different social medias, making sure you're engaging with them on the things you're finding out that really attract them to your workplace. If you have not checked out your social media as well, I would too, because you're recruiting well before you post a job. They're already checking you out for your Google My Business page, what's on Glassdoor, what's being talked about you on Glassdoor, Indeed, those types of things. So be sure you're checking out what messages are already being communicated to people out there. You can set up Google alerts. The millennials are going to do that. They're going to set up alerts to really understand what's going on in a business they might be considering, and do a lot of homework before they even come in for an interview with you. So make sure you're looking really forward to that, and making sure you're seeing what your organization is doing. These are just some quick tips. Not a lot of these, I think, are, and if you are heavily into recruiting right now, are very different. Again, I always say make sure you're mobile friendly. A lot of people just do everything on a phone now. Make sure you're using behavior-based interviewing like we've always said for years, but now is a good time to do that, and then listen. And then responsiveness. This generation is looking for you to respond. Even if the response is, I have your resume, we're reviewing it, we'll get back to you within 2 weeks. That personalization, that correspondence will make you shine right now. And it is hard if you've got a lot of openings, but it's helping you create the brand for you and the following for you. So even if you don't hire somebody, they're going to be more apt to recommend you to others if they have that good experience with you. So make sure you're extremely responsive and treating each one like they're that customer that you might need tomorrow. A little bit of the blueprint for recruiting the younger professionals and the millennials. Let's talk a little bit about retaining them in the last few minutes that we have. There is an excellent video out there, and I'm not going to show it now because I could not get it working earlier. But if you go to http://bit.ly, so bit.ly/Gen Z wants. Let me see if I can type this in for you too. This is an excellent video that kind of gives you a real perspective from the Gen Zs of what they think about the workplace and what they're looking for in an organization and their managers. So a really good video to take a sneak peek at. And I would encourage you to look at that later. And it's not very long. If I can get it. What do the millennials want? I've told you this already. You really, really do need to ask. It is really important to make sure you're asking constantly of what it is that they're wanting, what are they looking for. I've always said the cost of turnover can be anywhere from 50 to 150%. There's been an article in the Business Journal, I think I saw one in Forbes, that talked about the cost being $15,000 to $20,000 when you lose a millennial generation. What often happens is when one leaves, a few people will follow them. So that the cost just continues to escalate. And as I was telling you, the Gen Ys and the Gen Zs are the ones that are really going to be taking over the workplace because the baby boomers and radio babies retire. They're already over 50% of our workplace. And the predictions, a lot of the sociologists are saying by 2025, maybe closer to 30, that 75% of our workplace will be those Gen Ys and Gen Zs. That's a large percent, and you still have that next generation coming in behind them. So we really need to do what we can to attract and keep them and really make some adjustments to our workplace to support that. We're seeing some changes in the duration that people are in the job. We're finding millennials tend to leave their first job within 2 years, which in compared to Gen Xers, it was 5, and baby boomers, it was 7. But the primary reason they change is they're not getting that coaching, that growth opportunity, the benefits, those types of things there. If your organization can master that, you're not going to see these turnover numbers. Some of the things that we already talked about that they're looking for, am I doing a job that's helping me continue to grow and develop in my career? Do I have those opportunities to continue to grow and develop in my year? I think it was last year on Glassdoor, I saw 46% of millennials left their last job because there was no career growth. What is that path for someone? There is family or parent involvement, and especially in the Gen Zs and the younger ones. I think the biggest thing is that communication. We can't communicate too much with any of our employees, but especially this generation. If you've gotten rid of your performance reviews, what are you doing to make sure there's one-on-ones with your employees, feedback's opportunity to give them feedback, open door policy so they feel like they can come in and talk to you anytime that they may have a question or a need, and just constantly staying on top of that. Many of these other things we talked about, the work-life blending, the flexibility, values aligned. The innovation is a very key thing. We talked about that creativity happens in the workplace. So as we go more hybrid and remote, how are we replacing that innovation opportunity for them to really be able to think of bigger, different things to do for you and for the organization? I want to jump ahead a little bit. Here's some quick tips on developing the millennials that might help you. But I want to jump into the communications and a few other things that I know some of you mentioned that you're interested in. So I did want to just make sure I shared some of these with you. Communications, as we look at these younger generations, we all can use every method, but we are definitely seeing Gen Xers tend to lean toward that email for their primary use for communications. Gen Ys, Gen Zs, it tends to be texting as their preferred method. And surprisingly, the more and more research we're doing, we're finding the Gen Zs are more of a face-to-face organization. Definitely very different than earlier organizations, the radio babies and baby boomers, less in person, less handwritten, but definitely some ways that are more instant communication that can be done anytime, anywhere. So as you look at your workforce, whether you're rolling out a policy, whether you're sharing an announcement, one way is not going to work to be able to get to every individual and be heard. I mean, in general, you need to usually repeat the same message maybe 3 times to be heard, but you need to use different medias. Encourage that with your organization as they're working in teams and pods. What is their different times when you might use what type of media? So if you've emailed 3 or 4 times, what's the time when you should get up and go talk to the person or pick up the phone and call them, right? Kind of create those, what are the philosophies in our organization, how we want to handle these communications. That way it sets the stage. Interestingly enough, I had one client that was complaining about someone who was a young baby boomer that was constantly wanting to be on her phone, but she'd never been in a workplace where being on your phone was an issue. So if you don't want phones and you want them checked at the door, you need to communicate that because there's differences out there. Conflict is still a challenge in the workplace. We tend to see some differences by the generation. So I just wanted to quickly share a little bit, talk more about the younger generations. The Gen Ys, for a while, we would see they kind of avoided the conflict and really needed that coaching. We're still seeing that a little bit, but not near as much as early on. Really where you can pull them in with any conflict is making sure you connect the business reason why you needed something to go a certain way. And if it's not that way, what's the impact it's going to have on the company? The Gen Zs, we still see a lot of conflict happening in the virtual world. Remote has not helped us with that because you're not necessarily face-to-face with someone that you're in conflict with. So continue to provide those coaching opportunities to those Gen Zs and provide guidance of when they should just pick up the phone and call somebody and have that uncomfortable conversation straightforward. So there's definitely some ways to engage with conflict that may come up with the different generations. Don't wait for it. Gen Ys, Gen Zs, and the next generation, rather than letting it fester, attack it right at the beginning.
You never have to slow down at work.
Motivation is another area I often get asked about, is what motivates each of the generations. If you were looking at a high level, I would say the Gen Xers are a little bit more focused on empowering. You know, tell me what you need done, let me do it, and I'll ask you questions to empower me to do it. The Gen Ys are looking for that feedback. They want to know what they're doing is what you need, and they're getting the feedback on that on a regular basis. It could be more regular than like the baby boomers, an annual review was feedback. Gen Xers, it might have been quarterly. This generation is looking for day-to-day or weekly feedback, not waiting for another quarter to talk about it. Gen Zs like to be given something to do, but then have milestones of where they're going to be evaluated, where they're going to see success, what are measured. So a lot more milestones put in place to really help them know what they need to do and what they need to accomplish and what they're going to get in return. A lot of information. Just some feedback I received as I talked to millennials of what you as their manager can do. So this is a good one to share with your managers and making sure they're understanding what they need to do. So again, we talked about that career path. What is the career path, and making sure you map it out. Providing feedback that is regular, more strategic. The one-on-one check-ins are phenomenal, even if they're as short as 15 minutes. It could be a stand-up conversation you have with someone, just making sure that you're having that conversation. Mentor and coaching, we see this quite a bit in all the studies we're seeing, is the generations are really focused on how do I do better, how do I grow, how do I become that next leader in the organization. So they're looking for strong mentorship opportunities and coaching from you. Development, they're wanting an organization that supports that continued growth and development. And then we're all seeing that flexible schedules. If you got homework, I tried to mention it throughout while we were talking. Make sure you understand your demographics. Make sure you're really closely looking at what barriers are coming into play with your communications as an organization, in your teams, and one-on-one. They're different everywhere. If you're not already, ask for feedback, ask for it in those one-on-one conversations, ask for it in surveys. Make sure that our managers are being encouraged to take into account conversations with employees. With the job market the way it is, you want to get ahead of that as much as you possibly can. We talked about one-on-ones. I don't know how many of you already do them, but they have been really, really instrumental in helping organizations keep connected with the generations and providing that regular feedback. And then just look at all your processes. We just covered a lot here with regard to things that will impact your recruiting, your learning, feedback. Think about your current processes and how do they reflect on some of the things that the millennials or all the generations are looking for that may have changed even in the last year with COVID, the last 2 or 3 years with different changes that are taking place in the workplace. We can't afford not to attract nor re-recruit our millennials, so it's important that you stay focused on that and do exactly what you can do to help you be the organization that has that full workplace, even when 75% of them are those Gen Ys and Gen Zs in the future. You've got to do it. There's not a chance or an opportunity to not do it. So with that, I give you the survey that we're using, that you're more than welcome to go out and take the survey, but I am open to any questions. We have like 5 or 10 minutes. Any questions anybody has on the generations in general, anything I covered here?
I do have a question,
Sure.
if you don't mind. Yeah, I'm sorry about that Lutheran Saints and Ministry thing there. My name is Bill Fure. I'm with Primerica Financial Services. You know, you talked about pay, okay, and you talked about hourly and salary. What were the reactions to commission and bonus and becoming more of an entrepreneur?
Wow, so you connected the two to one another, being commission and entrepreneur. We're seeing, at least during COVID right now, we're seeing people very focused on what's in my pocket. You know, what am I going to get paid? So they need to see, if you're going to do commission or bonus, they need to see the connection of what they need to do to get it. You know,
Right.
Very concrete map out what am I going to have to do and to ensure I'm going to get those results. A lot of people are just paying really close to finances right now. The market's doing great, but I think the fear going into everything was it's not, and what if I get back in a shutdown again? What if it's not again? So I think if you're doing commission or bonuses, just making sure it's really clear. We're seeing people really struggling with sales jobs right now because of the commissions that they're having trouble getting people to commit to a 100% commission job. I think your idea of making it connected to being an entrepreneur is a great angle to take to help someone see that, because you do see a lot of organizations or individuals that want that, but you got to help them know that they can, it's attainable.
Exactly. Okay, thank you.